viewed through the lens of cinema rather than sociology. All in the Family. Season 7 episodes 14 to 17 plays less like a sitcom and more like chamber cinema, a series of confined stage pieces that turn the ordinary living room into an arena of moral theater. The camera never leaves Queens, yet the world enters through every line of dialogue. The framing is deceptively simple. Flat lighting, static composition, a 3-camera setup. But within that simplicity lies one of television's greatest experiments in performance realism. Every laugh track is a drumbeat marking the tempo of American discomfort. The first story, the pregnancy scare, begins like domestic farce, but unfolds with the precision of tragic irony. The blocking is intimate. Gloria moves restlessly around the kitchen while Edith hovers her face lit by the bright white of sitcom lighting that suddenly feels surgical. The scene could be silent and still carry meaning. The camera isolates Gloria behind the refrigerator door as she confesses her fear, creating a frame within a frame that visually locks her inside the prison of expectation. When Michael enters, the tonal rhythm shifts from gentle to combative. Director Paul Bogart stages their argument like a dance of power. 2 actors circling a coffee table that becomes both altar and battlefield. Carol O'Connor and Sally Struthers treat dialogue as percussion, throwing words like cymbal clashes. The editing never cuts for speed. It lingers, forcing the audience to sit in discomfort. The humor lands not in punchlines, but in pauses in the exhale after an accusation. When Michael finally utters the word vasectomy, the studio laughter trembles between comedy and horror. The genius of this episode lies in its refusal to give relief. Every laugh traps you deeper inside the character's moral claustrophobia. The surgical scene is filmed with almost Brechtian detachment. Fluorescent, light, shallow, space-sterile props, turning a personal decision into an absurd ritual. The doctor's casual tone, his let's boogie breaks, the last illusion of sanctity, suggesting that even the most intimate sacrifices are bureaucratized in modern life. By the time Michael wakes up proud of his mutilation, the camera has turned satire into elegy. The composition of him sitting small in a large white room evokes post-war alienation more than comedy. The Christmas dinner episode expands the canvas from the personal to the political, but keeps the mise-en-scène equally tight. The living room becomes a moral stage, reminiscent of 12 Angry Men-style blocking, every actor positioned at a different emotional attitude. Lighting stays warm, orange glow from Christmas bulbs, contrasting with the coldness of what is being said. The arrival of David Brewster, the draft dodger, disrupts the visual symmetry. He stands often in doorways, half lit, neither inside nor outside, a living metaphor for exile. Archie's entrance into the scene is filmed like a storm front. The camera slightly tilts upward, making him loom over the group, yet every time Pinky Peterson speaks, the frame levels again, re-establishing moral equilibrium. What the cinematography accomplishes subtly is to democratize perspective. No one is visually right or wrong. Everyone simply exists in their corner of the frame, boxed by belief. When Pinky delivers his line about forgiving the boy who lived while his own son died, the director cuts not to reaction but to silence, a slow dolly on Archie's face, his anger collapsing into bewilderment. It is one of the few moments in television history when moral revelation is shown not through dialogue, but through the absence of it. The sound design helps. The faint hum of Christmas carolers outside bleeds into the room like conscience leaking through walls. The fade-out that follows leaves the audience suspended without moral resolution. The next pair of episodes shifts to physical comedy but retains the tragic undertone. The missed bus story is shot almost entirely on location, at a bus terminal set that mimics documentary realism. The lighting flattens the faces, emphasizing age exhaustion and fluorescent banality. Archie and Edith's dialogue becomes a duet of delay. Every line feels improvised like jazz, riffing on miscommunication. When they miss the bus, the camera stays static for several seconds, a deliberate dead air that turns slapstick into existential quiet. Returning home, they step back into the theatrical space of the bunker house, where another story waits to unfold with the young tenant, Teresa. Here the directing shifts again, long takes, softer light, a near-romantic atmosphere that contrasts with Archie's intrusion. The sequence of misunderstanding, him banging doors, her hiding, is pure farce, yet the timing of cuts and the rhythm of audience laughter reveals something deeper, the comedy of generational displacement. Teresa's modern sexuality collides with Archie's Puritan spatial logic. The house as fortress of decency. Every slammed door becomes punctuation, every awkward silence a critique of repression. The staging of Edith, mediating between them, moving literally between two camera zones, is an elegant visual metaphor for the bridge between eras. And then comes the masterpiece, the chair episode. The most cinematic of all, though it never leaves the living room and one Manhattan art gallery. It begins with an act of destruction framed like an accident but lit like revelation. Edith breaking the chair. The camera holds on the empty space where the chair once stood, a perfect negative image of absence. In that void, the entire architecture of Archie's authority collapses. The director turns domestic crisis into visual poem. Archie sits on the floor, framed low, the background engulfing him. The camera slowly pushes in, tightening as his panic rises until he is visually trapped by furniture that no longer obeys him. When the chair ends up in a modern art gallery, the aesthetic grammar flips. The lighting becomes harsh white, overexposed, the frame filled with sterile geometries. The composition mirrors 1,970 seconds museum documentaries, wide shots that make people look like intruders inside their own civilization. The gallery curator's monologue about post-industrial authenticity is shot in shallow focus, her polished face blurred by reflection on glass. A literal visual metaphor for how art distances itself from reality. Archie's reaction, a mix of fury and awe, is filmed almost like documentary verite. For a moment, he seems small, almost tender, the only honest man in a room full of pretenders. The camera follows him in handheld motion, breaking the show's usual stillness, symbolizing the intrusion of chaos into artifice. The final image, Archie sitting once again in his recovered chair center frame static, is not comfort but irony. The lighting dims slightly, the laugh track fades earlier than usual. It feels like curtain fall at the end of a stage tragedy disguised as sitcom. What truly defines these episodes is the acting, the kind of ensemble precision rarely achieved on film. Carol O'Connor performs Archie not as villain, but as vessel. Every grunt and pause is measured to sustain contradiction, cruelty, softened by vulnerability, prejudice, undermined by humor. Watch his hands, they constantly fidget with newspapers, beer cans, remote controls, props that anchor him to the tangible world he understands. When that world is threatened, by feminism, by modern art, by new morality, his gestures freeze, his body stiffens like a soldier under attack. His acting is physical philosophy. Jean Stapleton as Edith delivers the opposite performance stillness as grace. Her timing is musical. She enters conversation on the offbeat, creating syncopation that diffuses conflict. The writers use her pauses as breathing space for the audience. Sally Struthers as Gloria brings a raw vulnerability that feels closer to 1,970 seconds New Hollywood naturalism than television comedy. She cries without rhythm, speaks over her lines, breaks tone mid-sentence, techniques later common in dramatic cinema. And Rob Reiner's Michael carries the neurotic energy of a man living in quotation, marks every gesture a parody of his own ideals. Together, they form an ecosystem of contrasts, a cinematic symphony of dissonance. Editing plays an invisible but crucial role. Cuts are slower than in modern sitcoms, letting tension ferment. The laugh track is often delayed, arriving half a second after a line, producing uncanny rhythm, a temporal distance that forces reflection instead of release. Sound design, though limited by studio recording, uses silence as punctuation. The faint hum of appliances, the occasional door creak, the muffled city noise outside, all remind the viewer that this is not a set, but a living organism. Each episode ends not with resolution, but with resonance. Cinematically, the color palette deserves note. In the pregnancy and Christmas episodes, warm tones dominate. Yellows and reds of the bunker kitchen, earthy browns of the furniture, suggesting nostalgia and confinement. In contrast, the clinic and gallery sequences use sterile whites and metallic blues, visualizing modernity as alienation. The contrast between domestic warmth and institutional coldness becomes the visual motif of the season. Every attempt to fix life scientifically or artistically results in emotional frost. The series thus constructs its own visual dialectic. Kitchen versus clinic, living room versus gallery, family versus abstraction. Symbolically, the recurring motif of seating, chairs, bus benches, dinner tables, serves as cinematic shorthand for belonging. Who gets to sit? Who must stand? Who has a place at the table? Every scene choreographs power through posture. When Archie loses his chair, he loses identity. When he reclaims it, he reclaims narrative control. In filmic language, the chair is both prop and protagonist. The bus station bench mirrors it, another seat symbolizing transition. Even the dinner table, with its circular composition, creates a democratic frame that continually fractures under ideological strain. Director Bogart uses these fixed objects the way Bergman used mirrors, as instruments of psychological geometry. From a rhythm standpoint, each episode follows a 3-act cinematic curve disguised within sitcom timing. The inciting incident always happens within the first 2 minutes. The escalation peaks just before the second commercial break, and the resolution comes not through external change, but internal shift. This is not narrative closure, but emotional stasis. A cinematic loop mirroring real life where people argue, reconcile, and remain the same. The show's courage lies in ending without catharsis. Like the best of post-war European cinema, it believes in moral ambiguity as the only honest aesthetic. On a meta level, these episodes also document the transition of American television from theater to film language. The camera begins to move more, the lighting grows moodier, and the dialogue embraces subtext. The Christmas episode, with its long silences and overlapping speech, anticipates Altman. The chair episode, with its object symbolism, prefigures 1,980 seconds art house satire. In this sense, All in the Family becomes proto-cinema verite, a staged reality, so emotionally precise that it feels documentary. Yet, despite all its technical craft, what lingers is emotional truth. The slow pan to Archie's face after forgiveness, the tilt down to the empty floor where the chair once stood, the symmetrical framing of Edith caught between generations. These are not just television moments. They are moving image prayers. The cinematography is humble but metaphysical. Every object carries the weight of meaning. The show understands that cinema is not about movement, but about watching people fail to move, about capturing stillness as revelation. By the time the final credits roll and the familiar theme returns, it no longer sounds nostalgic but cinematic, a refrain scored in minor key against the flicker of studio lights. The applause fades, the set remains, and we realize we have been watching not a comedy, but an epic of still life shot on videotape, lit by memory. The genius of these episodes is that they make the static dynamic, the ordinary eternal. In their confined space, they achieve what cinema always seeks: the transformation of the mundane into myth. Archie sitting in his chair becomes America sitting in its conscience, waiting for a bus that may never come, arguing over who deserves a seat while the camera patient and merciless keeps rolling. The genius of All in the Family lies not only in its writing, but in how its cinematic language evolved under the limitations of television technology. What appeared to be a simple multi-camera sitcom was in fact a carefully constructed experiment in emotional realism. Each scene functions like a miniature film. The living room as set the laughter as score, and the pauses as editing punctuation. The studio audience, usually treated as background noise, becomes an organic part of the mise en scène. Their laughter and gasps create a live counterpoint to the characters' private tensions. It's Brechtian without calling itself. So by reminding viewers that they are watching performance, it exposes how performance itself defines American identity. The staging resembles theater, but the direction thinks like cinema. The way the camera lingers on faces, the timing of pans and reaction shots, the micro focus on eyes, all show a filmmaker's instinct for truth rather than spectacle. The audience doesn't laugh because something is funny. They laugh because it's too real to bear in silence. That tension between laughter and pain becomes the visual rhythm of the series. In the pregnancy episode, for instance, the editing slows just when anxiety peaks. We are forced to stay inside the discomfort. The framing traps Gloria and Michael in close proximity like two characters in a Bergman chamber film. When Michael volunteers for the vasectomy, the shot composition subtly shifts. He is placed slightly off-center, framed by sterile hospital, White visually dwarfed by the system he thought he could outthink. There is no music to guide emotion, only silence and the echo of machinery. This restraint is cinematic honesty. It trusts the audience to feel without being told what to feel. The Christmas episode continues this philosophy. It's a masterclass in what television lighting could achieve before digital grading. The glow of Christmas lights contrasts against the dim brown furniture, creating visual irony warmth that cannot melt moral coldness. The set decorators fill the background with tinsel and ornaments, yet every object seems heavy with guilt. When Pinky Peterson enters the camera, subtly adjusts exposure, bathing him in softer tones, as if his presence brings spiritual light to a cynical world. His monologue about his son's death isn't scored. There's no manipulation. The silence afterward, a rare silence in a sitcom, feels like prayer. Modern audiences might miss how radical that was for network television. In 1977, silence was expensive, riskier than speech. Yet All in the Family used it as moral punctuation, proving that stillness could be cinematic even on videotape. Technically, these episodes perfected what later became known as motivated laughter. The laugh track doesn't simply cue humor, it interacts with character psychology. When Archie makes a crude remark, laughter arrives, immediately echoing society's complicity and prejudice. But when Edith delivers a naive truth, the laughter hesitates, uncertain whether to mock or admire. That half-second delay is where art happens. It's the gap between ideology and empathy. In cinematic terms, it's the equivalent of a jump cut, breaking rhythm to reveal structure. Norman Lear's editing team understood this instinctively. Each beat is timed not for comedy, but for consequence. They treated dialogue as music and silence as percussion. The bus episode shows how physicality replaced spectacle. The direction deliberately exaggerates the monotony of travel spaces, long hallways, metal benches, flat overhead light. It's anti-glamour cinematography echoing Italian neorealism. Archie's irritation at bureaucracy becomes the American working man's Sisyphean struggle. Every shot is functional, yet compositionally poetic. The human figure dwarfed by fluorescent emptiness. When they return home and stumble upon Teresa's affair, the tonal contrast between cold public space and intimate domestic lighting becomes symbolic. The house glows again, but the warmth hides embarrassment. The blocking here is choreography: Archie blustering near doorways, Edith floating gently in the background, Teresa caught between two generations. The entire sequence plays like silent film. The movement carries the meaning, not the words. It anticipates the rhythm of modern cringe comedy, where the joke is the pause. The Archie's Chair episode pushes visual metaphor to its peak. On the surface, it's about an object, but cinematically, it's about ownership of image. The first half is shot in naturalistic warm hues, the color of memory, until the chair disappears. Then the tone cools, the set lighting shifts from tungsten to white, symbolizing emotional sterilization. The art gallery sequence breaks the grammar of the show entirely. No laugh track, echoey sound, geometric framing, actors positioned like